Grace Hymn Supplement, number 10. We'll just sing it through once, and then I'd like to pray and then invite our brother over. But before we get into singing, I will just want to introduce the subject. The elders had sat together a few weeks ago, and we noted that between us, we must have had maybe around 10 people over the month who had died suddenly. And we said to ourselves, next it could be you, it could be me. And by God's grace, given that we're supposed to look after ourselves, why don't we have this discussion? And so we asked our brother to prepare and see if he could talk to us so that we may learn and listen and put into practice. So that's just by way of introduction for the subject that we have for today. That's the importance that the elders put to the talk that Professor Owa will be giving us. I'll invite us to sing together number 10, which is All the Way My Savior Leads Me, What Have I to Ask Beside? Let's rise to sing together, shall we? Let's rise to sing.
All the way my Savior
Leads me, what have I to ask beside? Can I doubt His tender mercy, who through life has been my guide? Heavenly peace, divinest comfort, here by faith in Him to dwell. For I know whatever before me, Jesus doeth all things well. For I know whatever before me, Jesus doeth all things well. All the way my Savior leads me, choose each winding path I tread, gives me grace for every trial, feeds me with the living bread. Though my weary steps may falter, and my soul athirst may be, gushing from the rock before me. Father in heaven, we thank you for this afternoon and the opportunity to come together and listen and learn so that we may live lives under which we look after our bodies and after our minds. We acknowledge, our Father, that it is so easy to neglect ourselves at the expense of other things which may not be so important. So we pray, our Father, that you may help us have the right priorities and the right viewpoints of the Scriptures and of your interest in our welfare. But bless us also by allowing Professor Owa to have clarity in his speech and emphasis for our benefit. Pray do bless him and cause that his communication would be heeded even as we listen together. And so we commit ourselves and commend ourselves into your hands in Jesus' name. Amen. Please.
Okay. So, yes, Elder sent some on the phone. So you'll have an electronic copy and you'll have a hard copy as well. Yeah, okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm promising not to take more than 40 minutes. And to make it lighter, I'll break it into about 3 sections. And after each section, if there are questions, I'll leave a little bit of a gap so that you can ask any questions that you have. Okay? So that's my first slide. Now, I used to write for the Times of Zambia when I was on the Copper Belt about 2016, and I wrote a series on health, and I was calling it Secrets to Good Health. That ran for about 2 years or so, and I threatened to write a book. In fact, I was commissioned to write a book, but I was just too busy to write it. But now the idea has been revived. I hope I'll be able to write a book called Secrets to Good Health. And in that book, you then would do secrets to men, secrets related to men's health, secret to women, children, and so on and so forth. So that's the format. I hope I'll have God's grace and do that. So this is just a picture of one of the articles. Now, the way I plan to structure this presentation is just 3 components. The first one is to ask the question, what does the Bible say? Part of which the elder already began to discuss. What does the Bible say about the Christian and health? And let me say here, without embarrassment, that the Baptist Church is not renowned for bringing this issue of health to the fore. And I think maybe this was because when the Reformed Baptist Church was set up, the pastors and everybody, they were very young. I remember those days, people would say, no, don't go to that church. It's full of young people. But now, 20, 30 years later, people have become older and so on, and suffering, of course, a lot of the diseases of aging and lifestyle. So anyway, I'm going to lay a foundation. Where do we get the strength or to begin to talk about this subject in the church? So I'll begin with the scripture, and then I'll talk to you about the size. How big is this problem? Why should we all become concerned about it? Is health a big problem in Zambia? So I'll share some of the statistics from the Zambian situation so that you'll be able to say, okay, yes, this problem is big, and these are the areas, these are the types of diseases that are a problem in Zambia. And then we'll discuss what can the church do, but specifically, what can you do yourself to preserve your own good health? And also, perhaps, what you can advise others. So let's begin with the issue of the scriptures and lay a foundation. What does the Bible say in relation to taking care of our health, taking care of our bodies. So there are many places in the scripture where the Bible talks about taking care of our bodies or being good stewards of our own bodies. But here I've chosen 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 to 27, which says, you can turn to your scriptures and the Bible. It says, do you not know that those who run a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore, I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I am preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. My main emphasis there is verse 27, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection. So, maybe just saying a little on this particular text. It comes from Corinthians, the book of Corinthians, and Paul wrote 4 letters to the Corinthians. 2 of them are said to have gotten lost. But the 2 that we have, the first one from which this verse comes is a letter of correction. He was correcting the church in Corinth about many teachings that they had gotten wrong. There was a lot of disorder and disunity in Corinth. And Paul's solution to their disorder and disunity was about discipline. If you discipline yourself, you will be able to serve God better. So basically, that's the bottom line of what he's saying here, is about discipline and the benefits of discipline, particularly discipline as it applies to the body. And so therefore, I hope you can see the connection. As a good Christian, if you are disciplined in your body, you'll be able to serve God better. If you are healthier, you'll be able to serve God better. So, it is incumbent upon all of us to be as disciplined as we can. Foremost of all, of course, we'll be healthy, but foremost of all, we'll be able to serve God better and longer. And this is a little bit of what Paul talks about. Oh, we are not moving on the... Okay. Next slide. So Paul encourages the Corinthians by using the example of athletes, that the athletes achieve success because they are physically disciplined in their bodies. And also that the athletes have a reward for that discipline. And obviously, for us as Christians, if you are healthy, if you are serving God better, there is a reward that we receive in heaven. And then finally, he uses the example of himself. The apostle disciplines his body. He even says he beats down his body. He works on himself so that he can be able to serve in a manner which is in line with the things that he teaches. Okay? So, that basically is the foundation on which we are saying, next slide, we got to discipline ourselves. We've got to be healthy in order to serve God better. So if there's anyone who should make health at the forefront of their agenda, it should be a Christian. Okay? So it's a contradiction for a Christian to be unhealthy, because a Christian is a good steward of all the things that God gives him. And the first thing that God gives us is our body. So it's a contradiction. How can you be a really good Christian if you don't take care of your body? Okay? And this, of course, is taken from the World Cup. We know, many of us are predicting that France is winning the World Cup, isn't it? Okay, but anyway, Mbappe has become very successful because he's very disciplined. And he's the top, I think he's already scored 8 goals if you're following the World Cup. Okay, so my next, I don't know if there are any questions. Just in case there's a question or a comment. Okay, if not, we can proceed. So, how big is this problem of health? And then the next question maybe is, how do we even measure the size? How do we know the size of the health problem in Zambia? There are two parameters that we use, which are called morbidity and mortality. Morbidity is how many people are getting sick of this particular disease. Mortality is how many people are dying. So that's how we measure how big the health problem is. I remember when the Minister of Health, the previous minister in the PF government, was trying to show how successful he had been as a Minister of Health. He was using maternal mortality. How many women were dying before I became Minister of Health? And how many are dying now? Okay, so those are the sort of parameters that we would use to measure health. How many people are getting ill and how many people are dying. And these statistics that I'm going to mention are coming from the HMIS, which is the electronic system in Zambia, which measures healthcare province by province, district by district, and then amalgamates them together and reports on them. The data I've used comes from the 2024 HMIS database. Okay, next slide. This one, I just wanted to show you that actually the biggest health problems are in Africa. So where it is darker, that's where the life expectancy is least. In other words, if we compare Africa and Zambia, people in Africa and Zambia die earlier than in Europe. So in short, the health problems are worse in Africa than they are elsewhere. That's what that map is showing. So the life expectancy in Zambia, as we will see, for men is about 53 years old. So if you are older than 53, you are supposed to be dead, according to the statistics. But in Europe, the average life expectancy is 75 years old. So there's a big gap. In other words, if we were living healthier, we should be able to reach 75 years of age. Next slide. Now this one shows us in Zambia how life expectancy has changed from 1960 to 2000. In other words, the life expectancy has improved. You can see the dip there. Can you see where there's a bit of a dip here? This is related to HIV. When HIV came in the 1980s, people began to die. So the life expectancy was down. When the ARVs came up in the 1990s, they allowed people to live. So the biggest cause of HIV, the biggest cause of death in Zambia is HIV related. And when there were no drugs, the life expectancy fell to 35 years. So you can see that this has been the trajectory of life expectancy in Zambia. You can go on. Now, this is an important point which I make because I usually speak about health to men in particular, because that's my area of specialization. But the point that these data show us is men die earlier than women. Can you see the yellow line there? That's the life expectancy of men. The red line is the life expectancy of women. All over the world, women live longer. And the reasons are many, but one of the main ones is health-seeking behavior. So if you ask any man which is the nearest hospital to where they stay, they won't know. But if you ask a woman, they'll usually know. So the health-seeking behavior of women is a good example for all of us. Yeah, especially men. Men don't like to go to hospital when they are ill, and so on. So in general, in Zambia, there's a gap of about 5 to 10 years. And even if you think about it yourself, you realize that your mom or your dad, usually if they have died, they would have died earlier than your mom, your aunt, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, in general, the life expectancy of women is higher than that of men. Next slide. This one just gives the details and breaks it down, the differences across the years. In other words, from 1960, this difference hasn't changed much. Women have always lived longer than men in Zambia and in the world in general. Next slide. This one compares life expectancy in the rural areas and in the urban areas. And it shows us that people living in the rural areas live longer than people living in the urban areas. Maybe you have noticed. And it sounds surprising. Why? It's the food, which I'll talk about a little more. The more natural the food is, the better for the health of the body. Okay? So, pizzas, Subways, those things are not healthy. So if you eat, the closer you eat directly from the garden, the healthier you are. Okay? So the more natural the food, the healthier you will be. Next slide. So this is life expectancy in Zambia by province, and you will see that generally the life expectancy along the line of rail tends to be better. Next. Now, so that was mortality, measuring the life expectancy when people die and so on. So we are saying in summary that the life expectancy in Zambia is quite low compared to other countries, compared to European countries. So our people, this includes ourselves in the church, on average, we die earlier than our European colleagues. And the women die a little bit later than the men. There's a difference of about 3 to 4 years. Now, what about diseases? There are two types of diseases that we are faced with in Zambia. They are what are called infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases. Infectious diseases are those diseases caused by what you would call a germ or a bacteria or a virus. So in Africa, we have always had diseases caused by germs. In particular, malaria has been the main cause of death in Africa and in Zambia for many years. But now we have two problems. We are faced with malaria is still there, but also we are faced with non-communicable diseases. What are non-communicable diseases? Non-communicable diseases are diseases of lifestyle. One of these days, if you have got some time, just count the number of shopping malls in Lusaka, and you'll be surprised. The greatest growth, I think, in buildings is related to shopping malls. Everywhere you go where there's something coming up, it's going to be a shopping mall. So we have adopted a lot of the lifestyle habits of developed countries, of Europeans, of Americans, and so on. So we're facing this dual problem, a problem of diseases of infection like malaria and HIV, but also now we're faced with a dual problem of high blood pressure, sugar disease, especially in urban areas. So this slide here is showing the severity, which are the most severe diseases of lifestyle that we see in Zambia. And you can see the biggest one is high blood pressure, especially in urban areas. Okay? So high blood pressure is one of the biggest problems in Zambia, together with its complications, things like stroke, heart attack. Most of those come from high blood pressure, which is uncontrolled. And as we will see when we talk about the symptoms, it tends to be a silent disease. You can't know that you have high blood pressure. Most of the people discover it by accident. Okay? The second most common problem is asthma and diabetes and so on. Okay? So as we go on to the different diseases, I will mention a little about these common ones. So just keep in mind that among non-communicable diseases or diseases of lifestyle, I'm going to mention a little more high blood pressure, diabetes or sugar disease. Okay, so of these diseases, which ones cause death most commonly? You can see that on top it's respiratory infections like pneumonia. But these are commonly cause death in children below 5 years. So one of the most common cause of death in children below 5 years is respiratory disease, okay? Pneumonia in particular. But when we take adults older than 15 years, that's when you begin to see things like high blood pressure, heart disease, TB, malaria, strokes, diabetes, and so on and so forth. So, in summary, from these statistics, we're going to take three of the most common infectious diseases, which is malaria and HIV. Now, TB I put together with malaria, with HIV, because TB is the most common presentation of HIV. So in the hospital, we say if a patient comes with TB, they most likely have HIV. Because HIV destroys the body's immunity and it allows the person to get diseases which are common in the community. Okay? So whereas a normal person might not get TB, even if they are working in the hospital setting, somebody who has HIV with a reduced defense system will easily get TB. So what I'm saying is that I'm going to pick out from this information that we've got, there are about 4 diseases that stand out. Malaria is one of them, so I'll say something about malaria. And malaria is a major cause of death in Zambia. HIV infection is a major cause of death in Zambia. And maybe you're going to ask me the question, why talk about HIV in the church, you know? Everybody in the church is HIV negative. But it's not true. Remember, the church is a hospital. It's a place, it's just like a hospital, except that the hospital is where people who are physically sick go. But the church is a hospital for those who are spiritually sick. And some people come to the hospital because they have physical illness. So my theory is that if in the world there is high HIV prevalence, in the church it is higher. Okay? If there is high blood pressure in the world, in the church it is higher. We should do a study. We should do a study. You are not smiling. We are not smiling. We should do a study in the churches and say, how high is HIV in the church? How high is high blood pressure in the church? My theory is that in the church, these diseases will be even higher. But from the statistics, I'll just pick out these 4 problems. Malaria, HIV, high blood pressure, and sugar disease. And these are the main ones that I'll talk about. But if you have questions about other diseases, and cancer. If you have questions about other diseases, I will be happy to entertain those as well. So if you look at this table, you can see that cancer is also one of the common causes of, almost at the bottom, there is one of the common causes of death in Zambia, particularly for women, cervical cancer. For men, prostate cancer is the leading cause of death in our setting. And cancers have been increasing. That's why you will have seen that the Zambian government moves with the statistics. So because cancer is going up, they've reinvested in the Cancer Diseases Center, and now there's another Cancer Diseases Center developing in Ndola. If you go the Ndola dual carriageway, just on your left, if you're coming from Ndola to Luansha, there's a big hospital coming up there, which is the Cancer Diseases Hospital. And the plan is to build one in southern province as well. So cancer is a major problem that we are faced with. Most of the cancers, by the way, are related to HIV. Most of the cancers we are seeing are being brought in by HIV because as HIV destroys the immunity of the body is unable to clean out those cancers that begin to those cells that begin to misbehave. And because those cells begin to increase, this leads to cancer as well. Okay, so in summarizing, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so maybe you haven't looked at these figures or statistics, and it may be a bit overwhelming, but I just summarize it this way. If we are going to measure disease in Zambia, the most common causes of disease are infections like germs, and the main one there is malaria and HIV. When it comes to diseases of lifestyle, in other words, the way we live and behave and the things that we eat, the main problems there are high blood pressure and diabetes. And I made the point earlier that the government responds to these statistics. So you will have noticed, I don't know whether you have, that the government has set up renal dialysis in most of the main hospitals. Okay? So renal dialysis is a system where when somebody's kidney stops working, there are some machines to which a person can be connected that can help to clean out the blood, which is what the kidney does. So diabetes, by destroying blood vessels and hypertension, ultimately, one of the major organs that these conditions damage is the kidney. In fact, let me say HIV, hypertension, diabetes, the end result is kidney disease. So we have seen a rise in kidney disease. So there's big queues for dialysis. So there are many patients lining up to be connected to machines in order to just live a normal life like what you and I are doing. Because if the kidney stops working, everything that you are eating, which the body is breaking down to discard through the urine, it fails to do so. So a person who has chronic kidney disease needs to be connected to a machine to remove the waste at least 3 times a week. So there are dialysis units in Livingston, in UTH, at Levi Mwanawasa, at Ndola Central Hospital, and Kitwe Central Hospital, and there are still queues. In other words, I'm just saying, as these diseases of lifestyle increase, the complications from these diseases have also increased, including strokes, kidney failure, heart failure, and so on. Then, in terms of what are the things that cause death in Zambia, I made the point that in Zambia, some of the main causes of death, of course, are malaria, HIV, high blood pressure, sugar disease. And the life expectancy in Zambia is around 50, 54. Whereas in other developed countries where they have reduced these type of diseases, the life expectancy is at 75, okay? So you as a healthy person, your target, you should live up to at least 75. If you are really healthy and if you're taking care of yourself in the way we will be proposing. Okay, so there's a pause here if there are any questions. If there's something that's not clear, you can ask now. Yes. Is there a mic? Oh. Let me give Mugala mic.
Hello. Okay. Yes. The first question is: you've said the major causes of disease the types of diseases we have are infectious diseases caused by germs, and then we also have lifestyle diseases. I was wondering what's the place of the viral, because half the time my grandchildren had viral issues, and there was no treatment other than taking whatever, natural things that the doctor would recommend. And then the second one is on the lifestyle diseases caused by lifestyle. I think a lot of us are aware of these, and the unfortunate bit is in Zambia, we still don't take it seriously. The reason I'm bringing this up is even ourselves, we just had lunch, and the lunch was bread, white bread, and mayonnaise, very nice. I'm sorry to those who prepared. I'm not trying to say it was bad, but I'm just trying to see how we can help each other. Having lived in North America, I noticed our friends are more deliberate when it comes to even communal meals. They deliberately focus on healthy type of meals. But in Zambia, we go for what is filling, what is tasty, what is convenient. So even if we are doing all this, I hope it will trickle down to our own homes and also even to the church lunches that we'll be having going forward. So I don't know what advice you would give on that.
Okay.
One more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said those with reduced immunity are prone to these secondary diseases. I have family members who have HIV and are on ARVs. When you're on those treatments, does it mean you are no longer in the category that is prone to diseases? Because the ARVs are supposed to help you improve your immune system. I don't know if my questions are clear.
Yep. So your first question is about viral diseases. So viral diseases are categorized among infectious diseases because the virus is a germ as well. So those would be categorized as infectious diseases. Most of the viruses are harmless and self-limiting, like the common cold, but the biggest viruses we face which are harmful are HIV, for example. We had COVID as well. So there are some viruses which are very harmful, but in short, viruses are part of infectious diseases. So this separation is useful because infectious diseases are usually diseases of poverty. Okay? Overcrowding in communities leads to easy spread of infections. Being close to animals leads to spread of infections from animals and so on. So infectious diseases are, you will never go to the UK and suffer from malaria normally. You don't. So infectious diseases are more diseases of poverty. Communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases are diseases of wealth. The biggest challenge we face is we have both in Africa. We are facing heavy burden of malaria and also the communicable diseases, the non-communicable diseases. Your last question was, I didn't write. Your second question was on, the food. Now, we were discussing with the elders as we were having lunch. The biggest struggle with food is that food is a cultural thing. And so people are used to a certain, I don't know whether you remember this statement, or let me make this point. Luapula province has the lowest health statistics. It has the poorest health statistics. So I don't know if there's someone from Luapula. My mom was from Luapula, so Luapula, this is where the shortest people are, okay? Because the food, the soil is leached by heavy rain, so very little grows there. So only tough crops like cassava grow there. So there has been for many years a recommendation that cassava is a better crop to grow. And you will find a lot of people in Luapula, eat cassava. It's resistant to drought. It's a very safe crop. It contains a lot of vitamins that are protective against cancer. So cassava has been promoted in Africa. It's cheaper, but there has been resistance. Okay? So maize has maintained its dominance in spite of cassava being the better and safer crop. Okay? So actually, if you try to go against culture, you won't succeed. Okay? So the young people now, they like pizzas, they like Subways, they like... if you try to convince them on health grounds to stop this, you won't succeed. So you just have to think of... So I'm just taking your point that, yes, even in church here, we should just be eating fruits and water for lunch. Just my fruits, oranges, melons, and water. But how many people will be happy with that? So we've got to be more strategic. And as we come to the solutions, my recommendation is not to cut out, because practically speaking, cutting doesn't work. Just minimize the volumes. Think about minimizing the volume so that when there's a plate where there is a bun with mayonnaise, just make it a small bun with a little bit of mayonnaise and put a fruit there. You strike a good balance. There's better chance of success. But if you immediately say no Coca-Cola, just water and tumanaches, everybody will go home. You won't have an audience. Yeah, so it's a question of compromise. The third question was about ARVs, and HIV damages the immunity. So it opens up, it's like a country where you don't have any army. So the other countries can easily come in and invade your country. So with HIV, it damages the defense cells. So it means any other infection, particularly like TB, which is common in the community, you can easily get it. What ARVs do is they minimize the virus from getting into the cells and damaging the defense cells. So it spares some of your defense cells. The problem is that the ARVs themselves have got some side effects. So even though people who are on ARV live longer, they suffer the side effects because usually the ARVs don't bring the virus to zero. They just bring it to a level that it is manageable. Okay? So one problem is that the ARVs have side effects themselves. They possibly damage the liver. They possibly damage the kidney. So patients on prolonged ARV treatment have other diseases, not as severe as the HIV infection itself, but as a result of prolonged ARVs. And also, they still have a little bit of virus. If they stop taking the ARVs, the symptoms flare up again. So even though the life expectancy of a patient with HIV is increased, he still suffers some ill health as well. So he's not brought to the level where a normal healthy person is. Yeah, so it's just like when you are hypertensive and then you are using antihypertensives to control, they won't cure. When you stop, the blood pressure will come up again. So I hope I've answered those. Can I continue? Are there other questions? Okay, then we can continue. Now, so I said that I used to write an article in the Times, and I titled it Little Secrets. Now, the importance of that title is to just encourage you that there are just a few small changes you need to make yourself healthier. They are not very, very big and frightening. There are just a few things you need to think about, a few little tips that you need to think about that can change your life in terms of health for the better. Okay? And so that's my proposal. First of all, you should know In your environment, what are the common diseases? Don't be so indifferent. Like, when you are young, you feel, no, me, I'm young. I can't be hearing about diseases. You see, but you will also get older, right? So it's up to you, and it's reasonable for you to think about having some idea. What are the common diseases in Zambia? What are the things that make people sick? What are the things that kill people? You'll be useful to yourself, and you'll be useful to others. You'll be able to advise others, and you'll be able to work on prevention yourself. And you should also be able to recognize these diseases in others and in yourself. Because sometimes the symptoms come early as warnings, and people tend to ignore them, okay? So it's to your benefit also to say, okay, high blood pressure, what are the signs? What about that problem that I'm getting? If I'm getting this headache at the back of my head, what could be the causes? So it's useful for you to know some of those things. And then you should also take some positive action on your own body to make sure that your body is healthy and strong. This is just good sense. It's good sense, as we said, from the Bible side, but even for whatever job you are doing, you realize that if you are not healthy, you cannot really be successful. And some people have said the greatest wealth is health. Even people who are very, very wealthy, like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs died of pancreatic cancer. He had so many billions of kwacha, but those billions of kwacha were not able to buy him health. So, no matter how rich you are, your money cannot buy you health. But if you want to be successful in whatever job you are doing, you should be healthy. Immediately you are not healthy, you will find that your employers will find a replacement for you. Okay? So the healthier you are, the more likely you are to be successful, not only in the church, but even in the community. Okay, so we've talked about what are the main diseases. Oh, we can move on. We've talked about, yes, you can move on. Yes. Just highlighting again the main diseases that we should be aware of in Zambia. We should be aware of malaria. It's one of the main common diseases, one of the main causes of death. We should be aware of high blood pressure. It's a growing problem in Zambia, together with its complications. Heart attack, stroke, kidney disease. These are all complications of high blood pressure. Tuberculosis is becoming higher and higher, mostly related to HIV. And as I made the point, if somebody has tuberculosis, you must think they have HIV as your first expectation. Tuberculosis is the most common way that HIV presents in Africa. Strokes, we were discussing again, if you count how many people, how many youngish people have had strokes in our Christian community, all of this usually is related to high blood pressure, which is uncontrolled. And then sugar disease or diabetes is also increasingly common, especially for people living in urban areas like Lusaka. Next slide. Okay, so let's begin to talk about some of these diseases so that you have some idea. I'm not going to talk about them extensively in detail because we don't have time, and also because you won't remember. I'll try to mention some of the common problems that people who have this disease complain of, okay? So hypertension, or BP is what it's commonly called in the streets or among the community, but medically it's called hypertension. Next slide. Okay, so nowadays, when I started working as a doctor, the blood pressure could only be assessed by a manual machine. If you've ever had one, a cuff, and then the nurse puts a stethoscope, or the doctor, and they measure your blood pressure. Nowadays, your phone can measure your blood pressure. You know that, isn't it? Your phone can measure, you can buy an electronic. I think myself that it's essential for you to get a device to measure blood pressure, at least one in the home. It's very essential, very useful. You should know what your blood pressure is. And you should take that as a recommendation from this meeting. If you can get a hold of a phone that will measure your blood pressure, the phone may not be reliable, but it will give you an idea. If you can buy any nearby chemist, you can buy an electronic blood pressure machine which you put and it will record your blood pressure. Okay? What is the normal blood pressure? The normal blood pressure is 120/80. What does that mean? Many people don't know. What 120/80, what does it mean? 120, then there's a slash. 120 divided by 80, what does it mean? It means the heart is a pump. Maximum pressure, when it gives maximum force to move the blood around the body, the force with which it pumps is 120 millimeters of mercury at maximum pressure. Each time the heart pumps, it relaxes. Okay? It follows the pumping. Relaxing is when it fills with blood. Pumping is when it removes blood. Okay? So the upper pressure is maximum contraction of the pump, and at 80, it is in its relaxed position. Okay? So these are the two pressure measures. The World Health Organization, which is the main organization for health in the world, gives us the definition of high blood pressure, of blood pressure. The normal is, the maximum pressure should be 120 and the minimum pressure should be 80. Okay? So that's how we determine whether somebody's blood pressure is high or not. And usually the WHO also recommends that a single reading is not enough. Don't just take one reading, because sometimes you are excited, there's been a good sermon, it's been a good meeting, your blood pressure goes up. Okay? So usually it should be taken when you're seated and relaxed, and at least 2 readings a week or a few days between. Then you take the average reading. Okay? So even when you go to the hospital, they won't say that you have got hypertension from one reading. They may tell you, okay, come back tomorrow, relax a bit, because maybe you're frightened, maybe you are on a queue, maybe you have a meeting and things like that. So you should take at least 2 readings, okay? And then you'll be able to say. And then the blood pressure can be determined as mild, moderate, and severe. Now, the biggest problem with high blood pressure is that most of the time there are no symptoms. So you can't tell, okay? That's why the older you get, it's good if you have a blood pressure method of monitoring your blood pressure, or at least 1 hospital visit a year, okay? One of the funniest questions which I sometimes ask is, who is your doctor? And most people say, no, I don't have a doctor. UTH is my doctor. Anyone who gives you that answer has a problem, okay? You should know your doctor by name, okay? And you should have a contact number for the hospital where you attend, okay? Nowadays, there are so many private hospitals. It will cost you nothing much to establish a regular place where you take your family, and at the same time, I can kick in that small idea of medical insurance. If your facility where you work has medical insurance, you should have some medical insurance. It will protect you from the crisis time when you have a health crisis and you don't have enough money. So make sure, as far as it is up to you, try to make sure you have either a facility where your family attends or a doctor where you go. And if possible, if you can have a medical insurance scheme, if the church can run a medical insurance scheme, say, no. There's no spirituality in that. But a medical insurance scheme, I mean, we know that most of the Baptist people go to St. John's, for example. If you support, you're going to say, he was marketing for St. John's. But I'm just giving an example. Many Baptist people go to St. John's, it's nearby, It's run by people from the Baptist Church, the owners, generally speaking. If it's a nearby facility to where you are, you can begin a scheme there. But at least make sure you have one place where you go regularly, at least once a year. And if you are over 45, you should check your blood pressure at least once a year. So the main problem is that there are very few symptoms in this. The symptoms begin to appear when there are complications. I made the point that the heart is a pump, and it is pumping every day. And if the life expectancy is 50 years old, the pump pumps every day for 50 years. Now you tell me which pump can work for 50 years, every day non-stop for 50 years. There's no pump, such pump. Even if you're using a water pump, if your water pump survives for 10 years, it's a very good pump. But the heart pump survives for 50 years, pumping every day non-stop. So you can imagine the kind of work that it does. So because of that, the heart itself can stop working. It can get tired and exhausted. But not only that, as we will talk a little about, the heart is connected to pipes, isn't it? The pipes that take blood from the heart are called arteries. The ones that bring blood back are called veins. When the blood pressure increases, these vessels get damaged. And when they get damaged, they narrow in size. And when they narrow in size, this gives more work to the heart to pump things out. And this is generally what causes high blood pressure. So it's a vicious cycle. You are eating, you are taking the mayonnaise, you have too much fat in your body, the body has nowhere to store the fat, it begins to store it in the blood vessels, and the blood vessels begin to narrow. And then the heart has to do a lot of work to pump blood out. And this is what causes high blood pressure. So a lot of the signs come from the damage to the blood vessels. So one of the common ones is a headache, okay? There's poor blood flow to the skin of the head or to the muscles of the head, and you begin to get a headache, okay? So mostly it's a headache at the back, this throbbing headache. And some people like to say, walampela BP. BP. So they even know that when they get anxious, their blood pressure goes up and they start having this occipital headache. But also, you can start having cramps in the legs. The further the blood vessels are from the heart, the more they give problems. So that feeling when you walk and you have to stop because you have cramps in the calf, that's a sign that you possibly have blood pressure. Your blood pressure is high and the blood vessels are narrowing. Or pins and needles in the feet, okay? And also, the other common one is you start getting corns on your toes and they are failing to heal. You know, thickness of the skin where you wear your shoes, and some of them break down and they have been like that for years, they have not healed. That's a sign that your blood vessels are getting damaged. There's not good blood supply going to the toes. The other one is when you climb stairs and you feel your chest is heavy, you feel you have to stop. This means the blood flow to the heart is poor. Okay? The vessels that run blood to the heart are compromised. They are narrowed as well. So beware of heaviness in the chest as you are walking. Sometimes it just comes like a sudden pain in the chest. You even stop talking, you sit, then it goes away. This is what is called angina pectoris. Sudden pain in the chest, sometimes going to the tip of the left shoulder, sometimes to the jaw. It's a warning sign that the heart is not getting enough good blood flow. Okay? Sometimes you can get dizziness as well. So, we'll talk about some of the treatments, but I can mention to you here that blood pressure is also related to stress. So, think about your work environment, think about taking some time off work, think about your hobbies, the ones that you have forgotten about, so that you get a little bit of relaxing, like where the men went for fishing and so on. Write some poetry, sing some songs, and so on. It will reduce your stress. Okay? All right. Next slide. This is, I've talked about the main organs which are vital, where the blood goes. The brain. The first organ to receive good blood is the heart itself. When the heart pumps, it first supplies blood to itself. Then the next important organ it supplies to is the brain. Then after that, the next important organ it supplies to are the kidneys. And these are the first organs to suffer when the blood pressure is high. Okay? So one of the complications is a failure to supply blood to the brain. If the brain fails to get blood for 3 minutes, it dies. Okay? The brain needs blood all the time. Right? So one of the main common problems of a blood pressure that has been ignored and not treated is a stroke. And the common symptoms of a stroke are weakness on one side. I remember one of our colleagues we were working with, he was on the phone with his wife, and they were having a conversation. And then suddenly, the wife said, he stopped talking, okay? He had a stroke while he was talking to his wife. So his wife phoned some people this was on the Copper Belt, group of elders and so on. They went to his flat, and then they called me as well. We found him lying in his flat, unconscious, okay? So it's not something unusual. It's not, what I mean is, it's something that we are seeing more and more commonly. And one of the things that this brother was saying is, why me? Okay, why did it happen to me? I'm so this, I'm a Christian, okay? But it's common in Zambia. It's common because of our lifestyle that we're taking. So it can happen to any one of us. And so there's nobody who's immune. So anyway, what happens is that one of the blood vessels supplying the brain either gets blocked or it gets burst. And when it bursts, a certain section of the brain stops working. Commonly, the person has weakness on one side, and they can't walk properly, and they can't talk properly. Okay? And sometimes one side of the face falls, and they begin to droop saliva on that side. Sometimes this effect is just for a short time. The brain manages to recover itself, and then they start. Sometimes, I remember one, I hope I'm not adding too many stories, one of my bosses, where we were working, in the university. My boss used to say there are only 3 jobs in Zambia which are very risky, where there's a lot of stress. Shall I tell you the 3 jobs? Vice Chancellor of a public university. Because of the underfunding, the university doesn't get enough money to run properly. The Vice Chancellor is always under stress. Not the Secretary to the Cabinet, but Secretary to the Treasury. The man who holds the purse for the government. That's the most stressful job. And the coach to the Zambia national team. These are the 3 jobs to avoid. Avoid these jobs. The coach to the Zambia national team. Because the Zambia national team is always losing, failing to qualify Africa Cup, World Cup, all of those cups. So this gentleman got a stroke himself, the Vice Chancellor, as he was going for a meeting. But fortunately, it was a short stroke. He got a stroke and he got confused. And he fell. But fortunately, it was one of those strokes where what is called a transient ischemic attack. the brain recovers itself because it has many blood vessels, and he just stood up and realized, and then he went home and so on and so forth. So, the point is that this is a complication of high blood pressure. And when the high blood pressure is ignored for a long time, this can be the first sign. Weakness, failure to talk properly, weakness of the face. Okay? So, we can go on to sugar disease. So sugar disease, which is called diabetes, it is of two types. You can go on. It's of two types. The one that occurs in children, which is usually means that there's a problem in the pancreas, which is the organ that produces the chemical that controls sugar, which is insulin. So this is called insulin-dependent diabetes. In the past, we used to call it early onset diabetes mellitus. Now it's called insulin-dependent because these children need insulin right from the beginning, okay? But the main problem we're faced with now is maturity onset or non-insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. This is where the problem has come. And this is where the lifestyle diseases have come in. There's an increase or an epidemic of sugar disease because of the excessive diets which contain a lot of carbohydrates and fine sugars. Anytime you go to, actually, if you ever go to Hungry Lion, there's always a queue. Have you noticed? There's always a queue. You know what I mean? You just, on Sunday, there's a queue. And there's a huge queue, and people are buying boxes, drums. So there's these fast foods, and so it's a major problem. There's an increase in, and what really happens is that because of the sugar that we're supplying to the body, because of the carbohydrates that we are taking, the pancreas is overworked, and the hormone insulin becomes insufficient to keep the sugar level controlled. So insulin is the hormone that keeps the sugar well controlled. But if you are taking too much carbohydrates, you outstrip the supply, okay? So it's more like a demand and supply situation. So this is what leads to diabetes as people get older. What are the main symptoms? They are usually called the 4 Ps. Polyuria, somebody is passing urine too frequently. All the time they are passing urine. Now the difference with something like prostate disease is my patients are usually have prostate disease, but they are passing urine frequently, but small volumes. So if you're passing urine frequently, large volumes, that is polyuria. It's suggestive of diabetes. Sometimes if the person passes urine on the floor by accident, you find a lot of ants around that area because the urine contains a lot of sugar. So it's the sugar that sucks water, that makes the volume of urination very high. So polyuria, polydipsia, which is thirst, somebody who moves around with, I mean, these days it's fashionable to move around with water if you're an athlete. But if you are not, and you're moving with 2-3 liters, drinking, I'm thirsty all the time, think about, could I have or could I be developing diabetes? Okay? Then also, beware of somebody who eats a lot but doesn't gain weight. Don't just keep saying, alikuwa worms. Eating a lot but not gaining weight is a typical sign of diabetes. You're just giving the child deworming, but eating a lot, but if you're eating, not gaining weight. So in diabetes, people tend to eat and not gain weight because they are constantly hungry, because the insulin is the one that when you take the food, it pushes the glucose into the cells. So what happens is that they say it's starving in the midst of plenty. So even if you are eating and you are diabetic, the glucose doesn't go to the end user, which is the cell. So it remains high in the blood vessel, in the blood only, but not in the cell. So the person will be eating a lot, but not gaining weight. Okay? However, the point to make is in maturity onset, typically the person is obese. So if the person develops insulin when they are over 45, typically they'll be fat. It's the excessive increase in body surface area that outstrips the insulin demand. Okay? Beware of sores that don't heal. Okay? People start having blisters. I know of one of my patients who was having, every time they shave, they have blisters that don't heal properly. We finally took their blood sugar and found they were diabetic. So beware of small sores on the toes, on the fingers that are failing to heal. It's a good idea to take a blood sugar test. All right, I think we'll talk about some of the treatments as we go along, but one of the easy things to do is, even if you don't have diabetes, try to reduce the amount of food that you are eating. Only eat when you are hungry. Okay? And if you look back at the way the history, or those of us who grew up in the 60s and so on, what it was is that there would only be food to be eaten when you are hungry, when it is needed. But now we eat 3 times a day, even if we are not hungry. Sometimes even 5 times. Because there's breakfast, breakfast, then 10 o'clock tea break, then 12 o'clock lunch, then 16 hours tea break, then supper. You're eating 5 times. So the body becomes overwhelmed with all this food that it is unable to digest. Okay? And its capacity to control the sugar levels declines. And this is what triggers diabetes. Okay? So eat less. I learned it from one of my patients. One of my patients came to the consulting room, and I found he had lost a lot of weight. I had been telling him, look, if you lose some weight, your symptoms will be less. Then one day he came, and I asked him, how did you lose weight? He said, intermittent fasting. Okay? So I learned from my patient, intermittent fasting. That may be 8 years ago or so. So intermittent fasting is the idea that you only eat when you are hungry, and you starve at least 8 hours between meals. And that way, you give the body time to clean out what you have eaten. If you don't give the body time, it stores. Whatever excess, it stores. And when it runs out of places to store, you're going to become fat here, in the neck, here, everywhere. Now, it has run short of places to store the fat. So it starts storing the fat between the blood vessels, so plugging them. Okay? That's what happens. So give the body time to break down what you have eaten. So the ideal period is that just starve at least 8 to 12 hours every day. If the longer you can starve, and for the church, for the Christian, well, you should fast. When was the last time you fasted? Fasting is a very healthy practice. It cleans up the body and restores the cells and helps the body to recover. It cleans out all the dead cells and allows the body to repair. Okay? So aside from the spiritual benefits, if you have the habit of fasting once a week, once every 2 weeks, a day, half a day, it's a very healthy practice. And I would encourage you very, very much so. And also, one of the biggest problems we are faced with is sitting too long. You are sitting in church, you are sitting in the car, you are sitting in the classroom, you are sitting in the office, you are sitting at home watching the World Cup. Okay? So all this means the activity, the things that you have eaten, they are not being broken down by exercise. So if you make a practice of walking and walking is inexpensive, nobody will charge you for walking, walk 30 minutes a day is a very good idea. So the combination of fasting, at least 12 to 16 hours every day, and walking is a very good one. And if you can reduce eating those cakes, those pies, those Coca-Cola, can you replace the Coca-Cola with water? Yes. Can you promise to do that? From today, wherever there's Coca-Cola, I'll say, give me water. If possible. If you can do that. Next slide. This is one of the things I like to encourage. I usually walk around with a measuring tape. If you measure yourself today when you go home, measure yourself at the umbilicus, and see if that will be more than 100 centimeters, you are obese. You are at risk of high blood pressure, diabetes, and kidney disease. You must reduce that. So for women, 90. You shouldn't have a measuring tape more than 90 centimeters. Your target, this is a very easy one to, you keep trying to keep your belly fat, because that belly fat is the one that creates problems for you. It means the storage capacity of the body is being outstripped. So when your circumference is more than 100 centimeters, you're going to start forcing the body to store fat in the blood vessels. And that will lead you to the problems of heart attack, stroke, and kidney disease, as well as blood vessel disease. Okay? So, we've discussed the other non-communicable diseases. Cancer, now here's what I'll say on cancer. The main cancers in Zambia are reproductive health cancers. In other words, they are cancers of the reproductive system. So in the men, it's the prostate. In the women, it is cancer of the cervix. How can these diseases, and then how do these diseases present? They present with blood. Usually when there is cancer, there will be blood in that particular system. So when you start coughing blood, the first thing to think of is cancer of the lungs. If you start vomiting blood, the first thing to think of is cancer of the intestine. If you start passing blood in the stool, the first thing to think of is cancer in the colon. So cancer damages body surfaces, and these present with sores or bleeding, whether it's on the skin or wherever it is. So if you start having bleeding, especially for the ladies, if you start having bleeding when you're not having your periods, it's a sign that you may have cancer in the reproductive system. For the men, if you start seeing blood in the urine or in the sperms, you should be tested for cancer. Okay? So this is the common presentation. Now, what are the causes of cancer? The causes of cancer in general are not known. However, we know that STIs in the reproductive system increase the risk of cancer. So if you're trying to advise somebody about preventing the most common cancers in Zambia, you should advise them about avoiding STIs. Okay? So how do we avoid STIs? A, B, C. If you have one partner, of course this is also the Christian teaching, you should stick with that one partner. If you're not married, you should abstain. Okay? A fallback, if you fall into sin, whatever may happen, you should use a condom. Okay? And finally, for men, I recommend to be circumcised. If you are circumcised, this reduces the risk of STIs and the risk of HIV infection. It doesn't completely abolish the risk, but it reduces it. So in other words, a very important secret to prevent cancer, even when you have children, you should encourage all your male children and yourself, you should be circumcised. So that's your resolution from here. You are going to be circumcised. And your children are all going to be circumcised. when you circumcise your children, you also reduce the risk of their wives getting cancer of the cervix. Okay? So circumcision is a very important and useful thing. The earlier it is done, the better and the safer. Okay? So if your child is in the first week of life or at birth, if not as young as they are. So I'm sure you may be aware of vaccinations now. The Ministry of Health has started vaccinations in several centers for human papillomavirus for teenage girls. So if you have a teenage girl, you should try and have them vaccinated because cancer of the cervix is the leading cancer of women in Zambia. In fact, cancer of the cervix is highest in Zambia. In the whole world, this is the country with the highest incidence or prevalence of cancer of the cervix. So for men, if you are over 45 years, you should do a PSA test. If there is a risk, if there's a family member who has had cancer of the prostate, you should do a test at least once a year, which is a blood test which assesses whether you're free from cancer of the prostate. In general, the healthier you are as a man, the more you exercise, the longer you're likely to live and the more likely you are to prevent cancer. So normally we would recommend exercise, but especially exercises that build muscle, okay? Heavy weightlifting exercises. Some of these you just need to buy dumbbells and every day you do a little bit of exercise of the muscle. Next slide. This is what you want to avoid. Okay, a pot belly like this, the tie can't reach the belt. What I tell some of my patients is, if you stand like this and you can't see your belt, your tummy is too big. Okay? You should be able to stand. Am I seeing my belt here? You should be able to look down and see your belt. If you can't see your belt, you have too much fat. This will put you at risk of all the diseases that I've talked about: high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney disease, and cancer. Okay? So make it a practice. Try to do a little bit of exercise and reduce the excess fat. Okay, next slide. So now I'm going on to infectious diseases, starting with HIV. I think I have a little bit of statistics. HIV is most common in women. The most at-risk population are women. And the most common risk factors are having many partners. And it's a good practice to do an HIV test once in a while. Some people do it every year, because that way, if you are positive, you can start ARV treatment early. The earlier you start ARV treatment, the less you get complications from it. One of the preventive strategies, if you are male, is to have a circumcision. So a lot of the men have very little or poor support systems, especially when they face a health crisis. And this is one of the reasons why men die earlier than women, because they tend not to be open. They tend to have, whenever my son asks me, "Who's your best friend?" I say, in school, when I was in secondary school. Because, you just feel that best friends is about secondary school. But the women will have, you'll be able to say, "Oh, that's my wife's best friend," and so on and so forth. So if men can support each other better, and I think this is one of the functions of the men's fellowship, we can come closer, support each other. This will help us to counsel each other and guide each other, especially in conditions like HIV. Okay, so this, next slide. This is trying to show us HIV by age, the prevalence of HIV by age. Next slide. This one is trying to show the point that I was making earlier. The HIV prevalence in Zambia has gone down. It used to be 16. Nowadays, in women, it's around 13. Among men, it's around 8. And you can see that HIV is more common in urban areas than in rural areas. But especially HIV is common around border areas, okay? Because of migrant populations, a lot of migration and so on. So border areas are quite at risk, and urbanized areas. Next slide. Okay, so I think that's all I had to say on HIV. On malaria, next slide. The most people at risk for malaria are pregnant women and children below 5. But there are certain regions of the country where malaria is highest, where the rainfall is high, because when the water pools, these are breeding ground for mosquitoes. And one of the places which is interesting is Mazabuka. I don't know whether you're aware of this. Mazabuka, because of the cane plantations, has a lot of malaria. And there's a tendency for malaria resistance in the Mazabuka area. And also in Luapula and Northern Province and Northwestern Province, malaria incidence there is highest. And the prevention strategies there are, for pregnant women, they take anti-malaria prophylaxis, which is usually it's Fancida that is used, and this is taken during the antenatal period. And then for the prevention strategies are things like mosquito nets for children under 5, and the council usually sprays the homes in the course of the year. And I don't know whether you know that Zambia has experienced an increase in malaria, because there was a time where, I think for 5 years, 3-4 years, the indoor residual spray was said to be causing respiratory disease in children. So it was stopped for some time. So what has happened is that malaria has increased in Zambia for the last 2-3 years because indoor residual spraying was stopped. But I think it has now been restarted. Okay, so if you travel as well across various provinces, you know, this is typical. I went for a funeral, and you come back with the headache, joint pains, fever, vomiting, and so on. And malaria can also be very severe. You can get cerebral malaria, which is, so if you travel, it's a good idea to take, you just take either chloroquine tablets, or you take Fancida prophylaxis. In other words, you take the tablets before, if you know that you're going to a malaria endemic area. Next slide. This is a slide showing, it's not very well discriminated, but the darker places in Zambia is where malaria is high. Next slide. Okay, I think we have come to the end. To summarize, next slide. So these are some of the tips. Now, I said there are maybe 4 main diseases. I talked about, I said I grouped them into 2. Infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases. Both are common in Zambia. If we talk about the infectious diseases, we're talking about HIV and malaria. The non-infectious diseases, we're talking about high blood pressure or hypertension and its complications such as stroke, heart attack, and kidney failure. Then we talked about sugar disease or diabetes, and then we talked about cancers. Those are the main diseases that I talked about. So, in terms of the tips, what can we do as a church? What we can do as a church is talk about it, produce information like the leaflets that I've given out, so that we know what are the common diseases, so that we are aware, so that if our brother, somebody we know, is suffering from this, we can advise them. Yeah. So here are some of the things that you can advise or you can do yourself. Number 1, diet. Most of these diseases are diseases of lifestyle, okay? Don't just eat everything that is presented to you. I know there's that great, but the science now tells us that the greatest problem you have, the greatest problem that we have is sugars, especially refined sugars. Okay? So if you can take your coffee without sugar, that's good. Or if you can use sweeteners and so on, reduce sugars. And the sugars are found usually in cakes. I know cakes are your favorite, isn't it? So you have to drop your cakes. You have to drop your chocolates. You have to drop your pastries, cupcakes, and so on and so forth. If you can eat proteins, more vegetables, fruit with everything that you take, that would be great. And if you can minimize carbohydrates, that means things like bread. If you take brown bread is better. Brown rice is much better. If you can mix the shima with a little bit of millet or sorghum or millet, so that you reduce, or if you can take, instead of your fine mielie meal, you can do the one which is the mielie meal, which is not so refined. Roller, okay, yes, roller meal is much better. Yeah. And then if you're going to eat proteins, the healthier protein is the white protein. So if you take fish or chicken, this is better than red meat. Red meat is a little bit more associated with diseases, even cancers. And if you're going to take fat, you should take vegetable fat rather than animal fat. If you cook the food, you should better cook it or roast it rather than fry it. Okay? So one of the good things that I've found, as I said earlier, is intermittent fasting. Because intermittent fasting is about quantity. Because most people cannot control quality. They love their cakes, they love their pies, they love their Coca-Cola and fizzy drinks. So if that is your situation, just reduce the number of times you take the food. If you can eat 1 meal a day or 2 meals separated by 16 to 12 hours, the body will be, you are giving the body enough time to break the food down and remove the waste food. So if you can't do the quality, like, replacing Coca-Cola with water and so on, you feel like people are making you suffer too much, You love the smell of bread. Like for me, addicted to the smell of bread in the bakery. Because that's how we used to, when I was young, when your mom sends you to buy bread, you go and buy, then you eat the inside. You eat the inside. Because the bread was hot. You eat the inside. Then you just cover. But when she discovers, So we became addicted to bread from very, very... So I try to avoid going to the bakery. Because when I go there, I'll buy rolls, I'll buy bread, I'll buy coney rolls, I'll buy all sorts of... So that's the sort of thing you want to avoid. But if you can't, just do intermittent fasting. You should do exercise, some form of exercise. The World Health Organization recommends 25 minutes or 25 to 30 minutes of brisk exercise. That means you exercise to such an extent that your pulse reaches 100. These days, your phone and your watch, if you have a smart watch, they can monitor both your pulse, your oxygen saturation levels, and your heart rate. Okay? So do enough exercise daily for at least 30 minutes. That I recommend. And walking is one of the best exercises that you can do. But whatever other exercise you can do, don't sit around all day long. Make sure that you do some exercises. There are some drugs that help with health. If you can take some supplements, especially if a lot of these supplements can come out of the food. If you are eating fresh vegetables every day and fruits, you don't need supplements. But many times as you get older, the teeth are a problem, you are losing teeth and so on and so forth. you may need some supplements. The best supplements that you can get that I recommend is for men, selenium, magnesium, vitamin D. Oh, yeah, we have them there. Vitamin D, omega-3 fats, which are clean fats. Remember that we are talking about clogging the vessels. These fats unclog. They are like when you pour vinegar into a kettle which has which has calcium. You find the kettle gets clean. So these omega-3 fats, which are good fats, are usually found in fish. They can be bought as supplements in the chemist. If you take that every day, the blood vessels are open up and your risk of blood pressure becomes much less. I don't know whether I mentioned salt. You should minimize salt intake. Africa, one of the biggest problems in Africa is high blood pressure. And one of the reasons which has been given is that the Africans started trading in salt with the Arabs, okay? And the Africans were not used to salt in the diet, but they liked it. They started buying a lot of salt. They were using it to preserve meat and also to put in the food. So one of the biggest problems they believed, one of the biggest problems why Africans in particular are prone to hypertension is a failure to metabolize sodium. So if you can reduce or replace the type of salt in your diet which does not contain sodium, and I know that these days there are Himalayan salts, I hope I'm not mixing up the salts for bathing, but there are different types of salts. Okay? The one you want to avoid is the one that contains sodium, what is normally called table salt. Yeah, so you want to avoid or minimize that. Okay? I already mentioned about visiting doctors. Okay? You should have a scheme, a health scheme somewhere. You should have a doctor or a hospital where you go, and try to go there at least once a year. Just do a routine checkup. It's very rare that I get a patient who just comes and says, but I have sometimes. Somebody just comes and says, I'm just fine. I just wanted a check. Okay? That's always a good thing. Not, no, to abushe fialala. So don't go for a check. There's something sleeping, you may wake it up. That's a very common. So go and say, I want to do an STI screen, to get your blood tested, get your urine tested. This will help you to check on your health all the time. From at least you have a baseline. Many people don't know their blood group. You should check that as well. Next slide. This, I think, is my final slide. Okay. So in summarizing all that we have discussed the scriptural basis of health, and I used 1 Corinthians 9:27, the admonition of Paul to the Corinthians. You should be disciplined. A lot of your problems come from being indisciplined. The biggest first discipline is how you treat your body, which is the first asset that God has given to you. If you treat that asset well, you will be able to serve God better. So this is an admonition. In other words, being healthy is not an option. It's something that God commands us to be as well. How big is the size of this problem in Zambia of health? We are well below, if we count, I don't know whether I mentioned this already. There's a ranking, health index ranking. Zambia is number 158. Okay? So if it was a ranking of sport or so on, would not be going anywhere. So we are one of the lowest ranked countries in terms of health indices. And our life expectancy is 54, well below what would be expected of 75. We have a dual problem. We have diseases, infections, and we also have these lifestyle diseases that we have copied from Western countries. Okay? Some of the small things that we can do to help us. Let's begin to look at exercising, especially walking. 30 minutes every day. You'll find that there's an app on most phones which will be able to measure how often you walk and how long you walk. And you can set targets. This is a very, very good exercise to do, and it costs no money. You can also change your diet and try to drink water instead of fizzy drinks. If you can't change the quality of your diet, just change the quantity. Eat less frequently and eat smaller volumes. Okay? One of the things that you can look at is your waist. How big is your waist? And you can monitor it. If your waist is more than 100, I mean at the umbilicus, you are too fat. You are at risk of all the diseases that we have mentioned. If you reduce your waistline, you will become healthier. Okay? I think that's the summary, and maybe if there are some questions, yes, we can. If there are some questions, I don't know if there's enough time, but yes, it's 14:40. So I have come to the end. If there are questions, yes. Yes, I didn't. Yes, breast cancer, I just chose the most common one, but breast cancer is the second most common after cancer of the cervix. So it's also a very popular cancer. Of course, breast cancer is rare in men, but it's most common in women. And the recommendation is that every lady should know how to do breast self-examination. This is the easiest test. In other words, from time to time, you stand in front of the mirror, just check whether the nipples are pointing. If there's one that's pointing in the wrong direction, they should all be pointing in the same line. And so this, if the nipple is pointing in the wrong direction, it's a sign that you may have something wrong with it. And then you should be able to feel your breast and feel if there's any lump. And if there's any lump, then you should go to your nearest clinic, have a doctor examine you, and also then you do usually, if you are less than 40, they do ultrasound of the breast. Or if you're over 40, then they do mammography of the breast. But thanks for that reminder, Mr. Simchimba. Yes, breast cancer is the second most common. And that one we should have talked about as well. Any other question? Yes.
I'm just making some three statements. One of them is on diabetes. At the hospital, we are told to take the medicine. I was told to take the medicine in the morning and evening. But what I saw here is that here with Shima, I know. Shima is the problem. So I changed how to take the medicine. I take it after my Shima. Then I saw that the HbA1c came down to 5.8. So what I'm saying is I think sometimes we need to go beyond what the hospital is telling you. Make it your own personal project. It will help you in some way, okay? Secondly, the issue of black men, the whites living longer than the black men, the women living longer than the man. I think that one, what I want to do is request Dr. Owa to go and see God and negotiate for us. Because I've looked at the several parameters. It's not just coincidence, they're there even in the cardiology. The man is sort of not so good, you know. So when we say that the woman lives longer than the man, it's just even the biological parameters. They're showing that no, there's something that needs to be upped up. So please, men, wake up. Let's do much more exercise, as he's saying, eh? The weather is not on our side always. Okay. Then medicine, science, and God, it's the same thing. The 70 years mark in the Bible. When God says you're going to die 70 years, you go to medicine, you check at what age are you going to have cardiac problems. They say 70 years. So that's another thing that you need just to understand that science, God, and medicine are one. Thank you so much.
I know you haven't talked about it, but I would like to ask about dementia. It is common nowadays. what could be the cause of dementia and how can we prevent it? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good question and something that we should talk about. So maybe there could be those who don't know what dementia is. Dementia is a condition of the brain in which, as people get older, they begin to lose their memory. You say, yeah, I know, my dad has lost his memory. But there's that memory loss that is related to age, but in dementia, the memory loss becomes very, very, it becomes excessive. Like somebody forgets their name, they forget the wife's name, they may forget where they live, they may forget what they do, and so on and so forth. So it's related to aging of the brain. So the question is, how do you reduce dementia? And one of the biggest answers I have for that question is that dementia is related closely to poor blood supply to the brain. So it means like some of the points that I mentioned, like for example, if you start taking omega-3 fats, you clean the blood vessels. And therefore, the blood supply to the brain is better. So that's one. Number two, if you can exercise a bit more so that blood flow to the brain is very good, then this will reduce the risk of dementia. Because dementia is becoming a very big problem because a lot of children are now having to nurse their parents because, like in Africa, if an old person comes out of the house naked, they'll be stoned as a witch. But it's most often is dementia. They forgot to dress up. They didn't know that they are naked. You know, they go out to the toilet, and when they come back, they go into the granddaughter's bedroom by mistake. They forgot where their room is. Or they go outside to use the toilet. They come back, they don't know where the house is. They start walking in the streets, and they are stoned. The dementia can be reduced by improving the quality of the blood vessels. And so supplements, exercises, diets that are low in sugar. But most importantly now, what is being recommended is mental exercises. Mental exercises, especially finger exercises. Let me share with you this exercise which I do. I don't know whether you'll see it from where you are. Shall I show you the exercise? I do this exercise every morning. So you take your hands like this. Then on one side, slide the finger this way, sliding. Can you see what I'm doing? And then on this side, just open. Can you see? You're doing two different actions. I couldn't do it also the first time. On one side, you're sliding. On the other side, you're opening. If you do that, you are strengthening the brain. Then you can change. Can you see what I'm doing? On this other side, I'm sliding. On the other side, I'm opening. It's a difficult exercise to do immediately because the brain concentrates one activity together. So you find when you try to do this, both of them. But if you persist, you will see that you are able. So there are quite a number of finger exercises like that. There's this other one as well. Can you see what I'm doing? On this side, you're opening. On this side, you're opening too. Then you're alternating them. Okay? So the fingers are well represented on the brain. So if you're doing a lot of finger exercises, you will be able to strengthen the quality of the brain. Here's another one, which I do every morning. See where my thumb is on this side? Then I do. Can you see that? They are going in the opposite direction. So there are a lot of finger exercises which are good for the brain, which strengthen the quality of the brain and the thinking. Is a question? I saw a hand at the back. Oh, you're practicing. Okay.
There's one thing I was expecting to hear on mental health. Where the economy is getting harsh, you have a lot of mental illnesses. Can you comment on that?
Yes. Actually, on mental illness, I have given several talks. I don't know whether any of you will remember 2-3 years ago at the Reformed Conference as well, I gave a mental health talk, and I also gave a mental health talk to the pastors at the pastors' retreat and to the... So it's a very important topic to talk about. And so what I can say is that maybe in the future, as we go along, as with the elders' permission, we can take mental health as a topic on its own. But for today, I can just say maybe 2 things. Number 1, mental health is neglected, okay? The rate of suicides among men in Zambia has increased, okay? Even in the church, we know that many Christians in the Baptist church have committed suicide. So suicide is a major problem in Zambia. Drug addiction and drug abuse is a major problem. Secondly, let me say that mental illness is higher in the church than in the community. Why do I say that? The same reason that I gave before. The church is a spiritual hospital. It's very likely that somebody with mental illness is going to come into the church for help. So the statistics suggest that there are more mental health problems in the church than there are in the world. So it's something we should be aware of, and maybe also to say that mental health problems are difficult to diagnose, and they are associated with a lot of stigma. So nobody wants to admit that they have a mental health problem. And many times in the church, mental health problems will be confused with the spiritual problems. Like, okay, no, this person has got demons, but they may just have a mental health problem. Okay? And the main mental health problems are 2 types. The first one is a problem of thinking and a problem of the mood, where somebody has a low mood to such an extent that they just start crying. Why are you crying? No. You can't find the reason that has triggered the crying. The person just starts crying all the time and says, no, that's how I am. Okay? So there's the diseases of mood and there's the diseases of thought, where somebody feels like they are hearing voices, they are seeing things that other people cannot see. So in summary, what I can say is I think mental health is something that we neglect, and thank you for the question, Raymond, but I would suggest that maybe it's a topic that we can have on another day. We could even invite a specialist to discuss that. Yes.
I just need help. Some 2 weeks ago, I visited my cousin, and I was told that the mother-in-law has dizziness. That's the same problem the husband had, who is also the father-in-law to my cousin. He also died of dizziness. So I could not really understand how dizziness can affect a person to that level up to death, because I was told that the mother-in-law, sometimes she just wakes up very dizzy, she can't do anything, but she's just in that state of dizziness. I would like to hear some help from you.
Okay. It reminds me of a patient of mine, okay? This patient of mine came and was complaining of ringing in the ears, one side only. So, since I'm a urologist, I referred them to an ear specialist. So the ear specialist examined the ear because dizziness can come from the ear, okay? But the dizziness that comes from the ear, because there are two mechanisms in the ear. One of them measures sound. Then the other one is called the cochlea. It contains fluid and it maintains balance. Okay? So if there is an infection of the cochlea, it can result in dizziness. Okay? So most of the common dizziness does not lead to death. Okay? So this patient of mine went to the ear specialist. The ear specialist examined him and could find nothing wrong with his ears. Okay? So the point I would make is that high blood pressure itself can cause dizziness and ringing in the ears. How? When it damages the blood vessels that supply the cochlea, this can result in dizziness. So dizziness is one of the things that can result from high blood pressure. Not only from the ears, even from the blood vessels themselves. When the blood vessels get blocked and blood supply to any part of the brain or some parts of the brain that control balance is compromised, the person may have dizziness. One thing you may have noticed, one of the tests that I do on myself is to stand on one leg with my eyes closed. Just try it. Stand on one leg with your eyes closed. If you're able to do that, the blood flow to your brain is good. So anyway, I'm just taking advantage of this to point out that dizziness can be caused by many things, one of which is high blood pressure. The other one, of course, is low blood volume, like anemia and so on. So if dizziness is simply the result of the ear problem, it may not cause death. But if somebody has dizziness, they should have a good examination of their blood and the blood pressure, especially when they are older. So it may start with dizziness and then end up with a stroke. So probably what I would say is that the dizziness they had was probably just a sign of a more serious illness, which may have been related to the brain or high blood pressure. So in short, whatever symptoms you have, just have them checked so that, oh no, it was just dizziness, I was just, after the funeral I've been dizzy. It's a good idea to have it checked, and then it can, some of the hospital will be able to assess what is the cause. Any other question? Okay, I think we are finished then. Thank you very much. Yes.
I'd like to thank Professor for an all-round presentation, and also, in a sense, a short notice, because he would have taken the 26th when we will be having the baptism service, but he obliged to come back 2 weeks to present it now. Just as an addition or an extension of our discussions, we are an institution as a church meant to be extending God's work in the community. When we hear a presentation like that, it's always important to ask ourselves, as individuals and even as ministries, what are we doing for Nyumbayanga area as far as this particular issue is concerned? So if we're talking about health, could there be a potential ministry to the people of the area so that they may become better and better at who we are before God? Because that's the calling that we have as church. I just wanted you to be thinking about that, because we shouldn't separate our physical beings from our spiritual mandate. That is part of what we are called to as Christians, and I just wanted a reminder, part of what Professor had begun with at the beginning. These are part of our calling as Christians. So to close, I'll just invite us to close in a word of prayer, and let's look forward to next week. Let's pray together, shall we? Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your goodness and mercies, especially as we consider the topic that we've had this afternoon. We ask that you might bless us so that this knowledge would not remain as a deposit, but rather as a means by which we would apply the knowledge to our own lives, that we might be a people who protect the bodies that you have given us, and that we might support others, even as we consider the various topics, the various types of illnesses that we have covered. We pray that you may make us people who look outward. The instances of the Lord Jesus engaging in society and bringing healing to society are many. And we know that this is an opportunity for the gospel. And so we pray, do bless us also in our thinking and potentially in the actions that we take. But help us nonetheless to always attribute to you all good, so that we ourselves may be good. Now, Father, as we dismiss from this place and go our various ways, we pray that you may go before us. Do bless us as we get to our various homes and begin the week, and refresh us so that as we do begin the week, we may glorify you in all works that we do. Attend to us in all of these things, O Father, for we ask it of you in Jesus' name.